Hello and welcome to episode 60 of the Dash Force Free Amigos podcast. I'm Mark Mason and I'm joined by my two fellow Dash Force amigos, Joel Valenzuela. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great.
Excellent. And Brian, aka Mastermind. How are you, sir?
Good.
And today we have a very special guest, Puey, the CEO and co-founder of Edge Secure, a multi-asset wallet. Well, actually, Paul, welcome to the show.
Yeah. Hey, thanks a whole lot.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I'm sorry about the looks like the crypto market crash has been hard on everyone. I just see your balance behind you on the screen. It's just rough. You're down to your last 130 bucks.
I know, but if you do the math though, yeah, it's gonna be hard to do the math, figure out what exchange rate that was actually printed at. But we're okay. We're doing all right. Luckily, that was an old screenshot. That was probably from beta. We didn't want to put too much money on the wallet. It's doing better now.
So what would you say is the tagline for Edge? Because I was going to kind of introduce you, but really you're probably the best person for this. I would kind of describe you as a multi-asset wallet with built-in exchange functionality in the briefest, simplest terms.
If you had to, so brief, simplest terms for the consumer, yes, we're a multi-asset cryptocurrency wallet with built-in exchange functionality, both from fiat or crypto to crypto. From the broader point of view, if you're targeting also developers, then we're a multi-asset cryptocurrency wallet and security platform for blockchain applications. And so if you think about it, blockchain applications, we are a blockchain application, right? We talk to blockchains. We use our own platform to secure the keys that we also deploy into other applications to secure keys in those apps. So that might not just be wallets, but they could be full-on like decentralized distributed apps.
Yeah, I don't know too much about Edge. I don't use a lot of mobile wallets, but I do hear a lot of good things on Twitter and everywhere else. People really do like the Edge wallet. So do y'all use Shapeshift? And I didn't know y'all did the fiat conversion either. Talk more about that.
Yes, that was actually a recent launch just the past couple of weeks where we incorporated not just Shapeshift. That's actually been in our app since almost day one when we had launched. But now we also integrated Simplex so that people can buy crypto directly from a credit card. And nice. it does have to do pretty heavy KYC, and it can be a bit tedious because there's a lot of information it asks for. But from the viewpoint of you can come in completely brand new account that you've never had, just downloaded Edge, put in credit card KYC information, and you could have crypto, Bitcoin, real, not inside of an account, but actually inside your private keys in your phone within an hour.
Nice. What do the fees look like on that?
So the fees for credit card are 6% total, and most of that actually goes to our partner Simplex. So a small portion of that goes to us. And so we know there's some that are cheaper, but a lot that are more expensive to do an actual credit card transaction.
Yeah, it'll take if like Coinbase, it'll take forever too. It'll take weeks and weeks, and that's not too much of a price difference. That's excellent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we think it's a pretty good on-ramp for a lot of people. We decided to onboard them first because it has a lot of global reach to get people into crypto.
Yeah, now it's interesting. There's a few different Dash wallets, mobile wallets now that have fiat buying options in them. And for example, there's a Dash wallet by Trust that has Wall of Coins built in, so you can just kind of hit buy, and that's extremely fast because there's no setup, but you still have to go to a physical bank location and put some cash
money
in and stuff. But yeah, we're getting to the point where back in the old days, you just I got Bitcoin, you got whatever crypto, and then you just get it. It's like, how do you get more? It's like, you get your friend to download a wallet, you give them $5. It's like, well, what do I do now? It's like, well, there's Mt. Gox, whatever.
Exactly. Go wire some money, that kind of. So it's getting
very difficult thing.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see that Edge is one of the uniquely positioned apps that's going to enable a variety of different ways for people to get into crypto, because fundamentally our ethos is that we are never going to be a financial services company. We don't provide those services. We don't compete against any of those services. We actually integrate them in. And so our previous app, Airbits, had several different ways. One where you'd go to local merchants using LibertyX, and then we had an integration with Kraken Cloudera for your bank account in the US, and integration with Biddy.com to do crypto from fiat in a bank account in all of Europe. And so there are actually plugins into our app, so our app doesn't have to change very drastically, but these plugins can be written to be able to interface with the wallet to buy and sell crypto. So we can onboard a lot more of these services. And we're also talking to Trust. They're interested in writing a plugin for Edge as well, so that you can use that service inside. And whatever currencies they support, which obviously Dash being one of them, can go directly into a Dash wallet inside of Edge.
Yeah, I believe they support Dash, Bitcoin, and Pivx at the moment.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, so you mentioned talking about Airbits, and of course that reminds me of back in the day. I used to use Airbits a whole lot, and
Cool.
the merchant listing was never completely up to date. But then that was during that awkward time when everyone was just getting ready to use Bitcoin, and then everyone's getting ready to stop using Bitcoin.
Exactly.
So how did you get into crypto, and how did you get this more usability focus, more like every man kind of focus on this?
Yeah, no, that's been our ethos from day one. And that's why the first thing we launched actually was a merchant directory back in early 2014. Even though we were working on the wallet the entire time, when we first launched the merchant directory, we were already building it. We did that because we really wanted crypto to be used. And that's kind of the ethos of what we build, is we want it touching the lives of billions of people, not for it to become this technology for banks or, as a payment rail and whatnot for between different merchants. We want it to be peer-to-peer. And so I had, was one of those early advocates, hey, trying to get merchants on board to accept crypto, find out how people can leverage it and use it, try to get people discounts for using it as well. And there have been some merchants that we've onboarded that have done really well accepting it. Even though it's a tiny, tiny portion of what they accept, how crypto is, it can suddenly become a very significant portion of your total revenue for a year, because it can blow up. But like you said, as Bitcoin became somewhat unusable and people just kind of use it as a speculative asset, so went the interest in things like the merchant directory. So it was sad to kind of let it go. But at the same time, as from a company decision, we're realizing that and now isn't really the time, at least for us. We're a small team. We can only focus our efforts on so many things. And so we are seeing that multi-currency, such as Dash, was more important for us to be supporting than a merchant directory for Bitcoin. And so I think that that's going to be a great challenge for probably another company to tackle, the merchant directory. I know that Dash has tackled that from the viewpoint of Dash merchants, and maybe that can be something that gets integrated or at least linked to from within inside an app like Edge.
Yeah, that would definitely make it like a integrated type thing. I believe this week we passed 1,500 merchants accepting Dash around the world.
Very
Nearly
cool.
a third of them are in Venezuela, which is even
Wow.
cooler.
I know. I kept seeing a bunch of Dash posts and tweets about that. So, I'm a firm believer in I think the growth model that you look at the way Facebook had grown is take a target demographic and really, really focus on that and own it to a really strong degree, and then grow outside of that. And if you've got Venezuela, just kind of, really eating up Dash, then drive it home until there's nothing left there, and then every other country will just follow suit. So that's awesome to hear.
Talking of merchants, have you, because your app is so easy to use. I really, you have really great UX UI design, and
Thank you.
it's just, I hate to
butter
say
him up
this
some more.
as a Dash
Hasn't
guy.
had enough. Give him some more butter. Butter him up more.
What I was going to say.
Well, I could tell. Okay, so if I'm brutally honest, I'm a Dash maximalist. I'm 100% in Dash, and I've never been a big fan of these multi-asset wallets. It was actually back in February this year. Joel was doing a review article for Dash Force News, which was a info comparison, and it was called "Which Multi-Coin Mobile Dash Wallet is the Best?" And it was comparing Coinomi, Jax, and Edge, and kind of Edge was kind of seen as the new kid on the scene.
It edged out the competition.
Yeah.
And it did, and literally, I kind of rolled my eyes sometimes, really, because we always had so many problems with Jax and stuff. It's kind of I'm not going to recommend something because I know it's just going to be a headache, and someone's going to come back to me oh, it wasn't working. Jax had some transaction issues where they weren't going through at one point, and I was just oh, I'm never going to recommend this stuff again. Anyway, Joel was just seriously, you've got to check that. You've got to check this app out. So I downloaded it, and I absolutely really love it. The whole username and the password thing was kind of a novelty, man, because you was kind of first in the space on that, and you've actually been a really big help. And I've had a message actually coming from Ken Bozak, who wants me to say hello, and he loves your application as well. And this is actually a really great thing. I'm kind of pivoting here to something else that I wanted to ask, but when it comes to actually onboarding users, I actually find it easier to use your app than actually the Dash Wallet apps for iPhone or Android. And I think this actually is across the board for other ones, because if someone's new to cryptocurrency in general and you get them a traditional mobile app wallet and say like, here you go, you have to sign up. Now here's your 12 word to 24 seed. You've got to write this down. They're kind of like, whoa, I don't like this.
What is this?
Yeah, exactly. And it's such a simple thing, the easy onboarding process, but also as well, if we're at events and we're talking to people and they're kind of like, well, I've got Bitcoin, but you know, I'm not sure about Dash. And if we're like saying, well, look, let's take the driving test. Let's send you $10, $20 in Dash and we'll set you up. Edge is the perfect wallet for that. And you have that universal experience as well. So anyway, I wanted to ask about merchants because you raised the merchants thing. So you have a real talented team. Have you ever thought about maneuvering into the POS merchant side of things? Because you're clearly good at what you're doing.
From a POS merchant side of thing, we actually incorporated some small tweaks inside of Airbits for those that wanted to use it as a merchant point of sale. But it hasn't been what I'd call a focus for us. We do think that Edge, the architecture, is well suited to be able to be a point of sale. What we're more excited about doing is really trying to empower other companies to build more unique apps for targeted cases. So like we said, we're a blockchain security platform. We are our own mobile wallet. We're also a blockchain security platform. So what I would be ecstatic about would be for someone to take Edge, the app, slice and dice it, change the UI into something that's much more friendly for a merchant, but it still uses the same ecosystem, the same login subsystem that Edge uses. And that would really excite me, especially the Edge login part, where someone can actually log into this other app. You've got Edge on one phone, and you've got, say, your store, your restaurant, and you install this new, like maybe it's Edge POS or some other brand POS, and you take your phone, you actually log into it, and that actually then shares like your XPub so that you can receive payments on all of those phones. But the UI being, tweaked, and I know exactly what tweaks are necessary. Like there's just subtle things that merchants are very accustomed to that as users we're not. And one example of that is merchants are used to pushing all the digits necessary, including the cents, to take a payment and not have a decimal period. As regular consumers, we're not used to that. We're used to like, okay, I want $3.5. Merchants hate that. They're like 350. They never put in a decimal. And so we'll notice with regular wallets, what a merchant will do is they'll put 300 and charge you $300 versus $3 because that's just their normal workflow. So there's just certain things that merchant point of sale systems do that merchants are accustomed to, and you can't. It's hard to reconcile that between two different apps.
I can actually attest to that because the AnyPay point of sale system that's mostly used around town here has like a very familiar sort of point of sale type thing, and it's the same thing. If I do 1 and then the 00, it turns into $1, and you connect. So
exactly.
And I've seen this intuitively used around town countless times, and it's gotten pretty interesting. Where one mark of it's easy to use is I'm in line with other people who are paying with cards or cash, and my transaction takes less time than theirs when I'm paying with Dash. And the guy behind me tries to pay with Apple Pay, and they're like, we need to talk to the manager. We don't know how to do that. But Dash, you just say Dash, and it's just that easy. And that's kind of how you know you've gotten the workflow really, really nice and smooth.
Dialed down. Yeah. I mean, I've felt one of the missing things. I do use Apple Pay actually because I really want to see what the experience is like and how it works with different stores. And some stores are more prepared than others. But in general, what I'm noticing is that most times, and I give them credit for this, both Google Wallet and Apple Pay, most times the merchant doesn't even know that I'm using it. Right? Especially it's on the side where the payment the payment system is actually on the customer side. It's like, hey, you owe me $50. Great. I swipe my card, I tap my phone, I do whatever. The only thing that's different is when I pay in cash. That's the thing where they actually have to do something different. But every digital payment is on that little box. And I think that is one of the things that made me go, merchant adoption isn't ready yet, because the big payment systems that are available to small businesses and medium businesses alike haven't integrated crypto. Once they do, suddenly all the crypto payments become super easy, and they potentially even become easier than definitely a credit card, especially when you got a receipt and you got to sign it and all that junk. It'll become way easier than that.
Yeah, or when you have to take the piece of paper around the card when it's not swiping, you put the piece of paper around it and swipe
that
it.
Kind of junk. Yeah. Yep.
Or, let me manually input it. That whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. Cards aren't easier than crypto. They're just more familiar. And so part of ease is familiarity. That's actually, so like when you were mentioning, hey, Airbits is one of the first that let you actually use a username and password. Edge lets you use a username and password. So we've said 12 words isn't necessarily hard. It's just insanely unfamiliar. and it's intimidating. So in the same sense, cards aren't easier. They're just really familiar. But once you make it such that to the merchant, you can't even tell what it is. You don't care what the user is paying with. Then suddenly crypto becomes just as familiar as credit cards. But from our point of view, it's even easier. So that's now we really get some crazy adoption.
Mark has an interesting perspective on the whole username and password login, because a lot of people just say, just memorize your seed words. Memorize your seed words, and then you can just reinstall. And then, Mark, remember your insight on that?
Are you talking about the airport?
Yeah, that whole thing.
Yeah, so recently I went over to New Dashire, aka New Hampshire, because it's not just Venezuela adoption, it's really popping off in New Hampshire at the moment with all the Dash merchants. So I had to go see it for myself, because the AnyPay folks there have a really excellent POS solution. Anyway, so I was traveling to Boston, and I landed in the airport, and the TSA officer, I think you call him, kind of like questioned me really, really hard, like really grilled me for like 10 minutes, asked me everything. But he even wanted to know how much money I had in my UK bank account. I was only there in the country for 9 days. I had loads of dinosaur paper money with me as well. I had my bus ticket, I had my hotel booked, I had the event I was attending to all sorted. But anyway, so like this just reinforced the fact for me. And at the event that I was going to talk about Dash, etc., this actually became a main talking point when I was talking to people at the Dash booth, to say like, well, look, if I'm setting you up on Dash, I've got to tell you this really great story. And now Edge is kind of my mobile wallet of choice, because if you're setting someone up with a Dash wallet, particularly on Android, you get prompted, and an iPhone, prompted to do the recovery seed. You don't want people to lose their funds, etc. And when people just say user and password, they really, really overlook that. But the fact is, that experience for me is a game changer now. So I can get off the plane, delete that application. I know this is probably something that you don't want to endorse publicly, but just for my own personal experience, I could delete that app, go through customs, and I can reinstall it again, because I really didn't enjoy that experience I went through. And if we're talking about financial freedom and just freedom within itself, right? What economic freedom is freedom, essentially. So that experience alone, and talking about my experience really resonated with people, and they're kind of like, yeah, you know what, you're right, actually. If you go in a country, you typically have to declare stuff. And I'm saying, yeah, don't, declare how much, dinosaur paper money you're bringing to the country. Absolutely. Don't bend the rules or anything else. But I mean, like, if I'm going into the country and I had to delete that app, now, if my Dash wallet, do you think I've got that 12-word, 24-word seed in my head? That, in principle, people are like, oh, yeah, it's easy in the cryptoverse. But in reality, a username and password is so much easier to remember.
Now let me actually, we'll take away from like the airport thing and take to, like, say you're actually being robbed, heaven forbid, and you have like a few different wallets. I mean, I have like a dozen wallets on my phone, but I'm crazy. But say you just you have all your stuff in Edge, or most of it. And then as soon as they're like, give me your phone, you just quickly uninstall it, and then just say, look, you can have everything I have left. And then you can open up every crypto app and empty it, or whatever you have in there. And then you don't have to worry about digging around for a seed when you run back home. You can just, as soon as you either get your phone back or get a new phone or whatever, you just get your money back. It's just that easy that you can remember. And people that remember their seed words can do this as well. The problem is it's just too many. It's a lot of things to remember. You got to remember that word, 12 words and their order. Whereas with the username and password, you remember two things: the name and then the password. And it's very much easier from the brain.
Yeah, exactly. I think what we're effectively allowing people to do is be able to scale that from like a very kind of simple username and password all the way down to this 12 words. So what level between that you choose to be in is a little bit more in control by you, versus simply being in control of the app that you're running. It says, boom, this is exactly what you get, 12, which in some cryptography worlds, many people say 12 isn't even enough. And you really need more than the 16 to 24. Then it becomes insanely unmemorable. And so it really becomes like, how do you really manage keys? And actually, even more than just, you guys really hit on the point of how do you memorize it, where do you put it? One of the things that we're noticing is that's only half of the issue. The other half of the issue is, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to memorize. I'm going to write it down. And that's not so hard to write it down, but where do you then put it?
Yeah.
Like, if you ask yourself from the viewpoint of like humanity, like we're good at hiding things, and we're good at remembering things that we use a lot, but we're not good at both. Like, this thing is a backup. And so when you put it somewhere, ideally you don't ever touch it, right? It's only an emergency that you ever touch it. So then the question is like, well, out of sight, out of mind. Like I don't use it on a regular. So where was that thing I put? And I do have backups of Bitcoin wallets that have like tokens on them from back in 2013 that I cannot find. The app, and if you think of tokens that I could have gotten in 2013, some of them are actually worth quite a bit. And so,
biggest thief is your own memory.
Is your own memory, exactly. And so, there's that. Of course, there is a compromise in that. Obviously, if you're going to have something that's lower entropy, then it is something that's easier to be attacked. But then we layer additional tech on top of that to protect it. So the nice thing about a password, which people also forget, is just because someone finds it doesn't mean that they get access to your account necessarily. So one thing that we do recommend, I do recommend you guys look at doing this, is enabling two-factor authentication. And so that makes it where, yeah, sure, maybe your password's really strong. Like say it's 5 words. That's actually a really strong password, 5 words, 5 random words, but it's more memorable. But if someone finds that piece of paper, the two-factor protects you. So those are things you could play with passwords that you can't play with 12 words. As well, we can rate limit it. Someone on the other side of the world trying to guess your password would quickly get rate limited after like 3 incorrect guesses.
What about the fingerprint login? When you launched that feature, did you get any pushback? Because when I first saw that I could log in with my fingerprint, I really didn't like it. And I remember telling Brian about it because we were talking about putting it in the Dash wallet. I was like, I don't know, I don't like this. Yeah. And but now I can't live without it. Like it's so easy.
No, I can't live without it either.
Yeah.
But once you understand how it works, though, so there's 2 ways that applications implement fingerprint login. There's a really, really poor, crappy way, which is purely convenience, and another way, which is the correct way to do it. So most applications, like if you launch, I don't know, like Facebook or some other kind of like normal centralized apps, the fingerprint, all it really does is it tells the app, hey, this user is logged in, meaning it's the same user. But the data that it has access to on the phone isn't really encrypted at all. It's just kind of like soft security, right? It's just a little gatekeeper to get you into the app. Now, the way we implement it and what we require before we implement it is that there has to be some type of hardware security on the phone, meaning that there's private keys that we're securing on the phone that are encrypted, but the only way to decrypt them is via a key inside of the secure element on the phone. And the only way to get it is with your thumbprint or Face ID or whatever. So the nice thing about that is that secure element can protect the data if someone were to get access to your phone and literally try to open up and look at the memory and the hard drive on the phone. Well, it's encrypted and they can't get into it because the key's in the secure element. And that secure element you just don't break into. You simply can't break into. And you really need to scan your face or your thumbprint. And it rate limits that too. That little secure element will say, oh, you got your thumbprint wrong 5 times? Sorry, you can't get in. You're going to have to access it another way, such as a full PIN or whatnot.
So you have no access to the fingerprints at all. That's unique. That's just on the device.
On that device. You'll notice that you'll never be able to buy a brand new phone and like log into anything with your thumbprint.
Yeah.
Right. So thumbprints, and I've had many discussions with people that think biometrics is the way of the future, so we never have passwords. I'm like, you're not going to have that ever happen, because biometrics will be specifically limited to devices that you have authenticated on before that are yours. Right. That's really what they're never going to be used to authenticate to a server. I'll tell you that right now. Like I won't eat my penis, but I'm not gonna go down the McAfee route, but I'll eat my dirty gym shorts if I'm gonna, on a mass consumer scale, especially in developed countries, use my thumbprint to authenticate to a server, not to my device, but to a server. Like walk up to a brand new computer that I'm holding and I've never used this computer before, launch a browser and like thumbprint into my Facebook account. That's a little
Skynet-y.
It's not even Skynet-y. It's instantly broken from day one, because if Facebook wants to accept a thumbprint for me to log in, that means it's accepting a digital image of a thumbprint over the internet, which means that any man in the middle attack can grab a digital image of my thumbprint and then send it to another server that accepts a thumbprint, because it's an imperfect method of authentication, and you can never change it. I can never change my thumbprint. And so if 2 services, 3 or 4 or 5 accept a biometric, as soon as one of them is compromised, then all 5 of them are compromised, and you can't change it. So it'll never happen. I feel pretty confident that won't ever be. So,
yeah, you need a like a implantable RFID tag
which you then will have to dig out of your finger and replace if your service got compromised. So really, what we're going to have is, fundamentally, I think that something like, if not a password that is long and strong, that is memorable to us, will be the encryption key that encrypts a bunch of other things, such as private keys, such as random passwords for other websites, or also encrypts just our personal data. But we will have to have kind of that last password model, that password manager model, where you still have to have a password, but you don't need so many. And when you don't need many, they can be long, strong, memorable, and nearly unbreakable.
Yeah, one thing that's always worked for me personally is things that I can easily remember, right? So the some kind of like a correlation to the use case. So then you can have a bunch of different passwords and still remember all of them, because you get kind of a brain trigger to what it's going to be, to something it's going to be. Or, for example, you could have some sort of a format in your brain that then allows you to decode things. Or, for example, like, writing down your seed words in the wrong order intentionally, but you'll always remember which order you do that in. And then someone would have to then get that piece of knowledge to then decrypt that.
Yeah. And really then at that point, it's really a trade-off between the complexity of the mind and the complexity of the algorithm. Like, how strong is your mind able to remember that algorithm, or you're basically creating an encryption algorithm in your head is what you're effectively doing. Now the question is, how good of an encryption algorithm are you able to put into your head versus what computers have been able to do or undo. So I think that there's some capacity, and a lot of people do this, where they create some algorithm to create unique passwords for the different services. And I found that we have too many services for me to be able to do that. And so I am of the kind of password manager model type of a person. And that's what Edge is effectively built on, is this password manager model, where you can now have a bunch of different keys, but you don't actually remember those. You have one master password that encrypts and backs up all of those keys. And you'll see coming down the pipe in the future that Edge will be a storage for not just your private keys for crypto, but also for things like passwords and personal sensitive information. That way, different apps can get built. They all secure the sensitive data, and you just have one really strong, long encryption account, password and username that secures all of that. And you don't have to memorize 10, 20, 50. And I know that my password for my account is just about nearly unbreakable, like cryptographically in all ways that people test breakability. But I've only got maybe 2 or 3 passwords that I think are at that level. But I think long term, that's all you're going to need.
While we're talking about privacy and security, I noticed you recently integrated Monero, and this particular interest to Brian, because he's a big Monero fan.
Yeah. Oh, really? Okay, cool.
When it comes to privacy and security and Monero and these kind of like privacy-centric coins, as they've been dubbed by the media, have you run into any like regulation issues? And Paul, when are you going to integrate PrivateSend?
Well, I think PrivateSend still needs to actually get implemented, at least the newer version of it, right? Before we can integrate it, my understanding.
12.4
you're waiting for 12.4 for the dips. Yeah,
right. So
because
I guess that's going to happen first.
But it's on the roadmap though, right?
Got it. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, on the roadmap, I would say I need more information on what it would take to integrate before I could say that it's onto the roadmap. So that's the engineering effort. Definitely is a piece that has to be closely evaluated, and we closely evaluated what it took to do Monero, and there was what I'd call a huge amount of assistance from the Monero team in helping us out.
Wow, that's a change. I remember Jax had lots of issues. They had to even write some posts about that.
Yes, it's extremely well documented.
I guess
how much difficulty they had. So I guess what doesn't
maybe
kill
they just don't. Maybe they just don't have it in them.
Well, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and I'm really glad that they seem to have decided to work really hard at getting into these mobile apps. And I mean, it seems to have paid off. And so that means that a Edge Monero wallet has to connect to obviously your nodes. So they have to give the view keys to the Edge nodes, correct?
Yeah, so there is definitely a compromise of security for the way Monero has implemented their privacy for light client wallets. And this is actually, I'm not sure how technical you guys are, but I can go down a whole rabbit hole discussion on this, in the sense that there's multiple aspects of privacy and privacy coins, right? So there's different things that you could do to make this part of the coin private, this part of the coin private, this part of the coin private. There's 3 main pieces. One is privacy for the sender, and that's the mixing that Monero does. So like, coin join in Bitcoin, and these ring CT signatures, which basically mix different inputs into a transaction. That's one aspect of the privacy, and that has nothing to do with the view key, right? You get that even if your view key is compromised. The other piece is hiding the amounts. So like what amount was effectively sent. That you also get from the sender's point of view. However, there's a third piece, which is really important to me. This is the most important piece of privacy. Well, not the most. It's the most important piece from a user experience point of view, which is the recipient's privacy, not the senders, but the receivers. And this is where Monero uses a technology called stealth addresses. And I've known about, and I originally was a fan of stealth addresses since Amir Taki had implemented them in Dark Wallet.
Yeah.
And if you know the origins of Airbits worked very closely with Amir to work on LibBitcoin, which is what was used for Dark Wallet. But I've since become not a big fan of stealth addresses because of this limitation that in order for you to know what money you've received, to know your transactions in your stealth address, you effectively have to parse the entire blockchain. You've got to hold the funnel to your mouth and just get the entire blockchain coming through you to decrypt what might be yours.
Is that BIP 47 like the stealth addresses?
No, that's payment codes. BIP 47, I believe, is payment codes. That I am a fan of. So Justice Ranveer worked on payment codes, and it was an idea that was circulating in my head about a year before I heard from him. And he actually put it into a doc, which is awesome. I give him a lot of credit for that because I hate writing white papers. But payment codes.
Well, that makes it kind of unique in the cryptocurrency space because it seems like we got a white paper mill going on out here.
Oh, exactly. I know, man. White, whatever you want to call it, blue, red, green. But
magenta paper.
Paper, yeah, whatever color you want. They're anything but actual white papers. But so that protocol, payment codes, does solve this problem in the sense that you can give someone this one unique address. You can even associate it with your first and last name if you wanted to, but no one can know what money was received into that address, and you don't have to scan the entire blockchain. You only scan what you know is money that's going to go to you. And so it works really well with light client wallets, but none of the privacy coins that I'm aware of implement this. So Zcash doesn't do it, Monero doesn't do it, all of the forks of Monero, all of the forks of Zcash, to my understanding, don't do it. The only one that is considering using it is Zcoin. Which happens to also be inside of Edge, but right now not with the privacy features. But they're looking at using it, and so any coin could use it. Dash could use it actually, and it would improve both user experience and privacy because it isn't protocol specific. It's protocol agnostic. It's entirely technology that sits at the wallet level.
Yeah. So when you say Dash could use it, what you mean more is a Dash wallet could implement it, not that Dash itself has to change in some way to use it.
You could also say the same thing of Monero in the sense that the stealth addresses on Monero are really just a wallet feature, but Monero as almost like a community and as a protocol as a whole has said this is the standard. Like we are only going to be using stealth addresses and nothing else. And so I don't know if that actually happened at the initial launch of Monero or after a period of time, but if Dash were to actually make that transition and say, okay, as of this date, all of the Dash branded products are only going to implement like payment code addresses, and that's what we're going to use for the transactions. And it would be a huge effort, don't get me wrong, but it would provide probably the best user experience and privacy of all of crypto, because for once I can now say, my name is Paul Puey, here's my address. I don't care that you know my address and it's associated with my name.
Yeah, so this kind of thing could be made optional in every single wallet it's implemented in, correct?
You can make it optional, but this is one of the things I give Monero huge credit for, and which is why so much of the world likes them for privacy, is it's not optional. As soon as you make something optional like Zcash, you lose a tremendous amount of traction of that technology. And so, yes, you can make it optional. You're guaranteed you're not going to use it.
Well, let me apply. I'm not sure if it's a counter argument. It is kind of in line with that. But there's two different approaches to things. What I call the free market and the regulatory approach. The Monero approach is like the regulatory approach. The law says you have to do this. It doesn't matter if it inconveniences and makes your life miserable. If you want to use this, you have to play by this single rule. And then therefore you force people into it. But then the free market approach is you can or you can't depending on what you want to do. Now, if you want people to use privacy features, you have to somehow make them you have to somehow create conditions where they want to use that. I mean, if they have to value it, and if they don't value it, well, they'll use a different coin anyway, i.e. they'll move to a different country where their regulatory environment is more favorable to do business in the regulatory example. But if not enough people are using privacy, then either they don't value it, or there's things that are barriers to them using it. For example, I use private send on Dash several times a week, just because, I have my whole full node at home. And I go and just, whenever I'm at my computer, it just doesn't make sense to not use it when I'm just paying for stuff online. But then when I got my mobile wallet, it doesn't have it. And so I can't kind of use it. Or sometimes people mix and it takes a long time to mix, or there's certain limitations, or there's a fee problem. And so what I'm kind of thinking that the alternative to forcing it is also improving. Don't force people to use your product. Make your product undeniably good.
Right. So when you say force, or when I say force, that comes with a whole lot of gray area, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when we say government force, I'm usually thinking like someone's going to hold a gun if you don't do it, right? Ooh. Exactly. And so would you call it force if the iOS and Android versions of the Dash wallet would only be able to scan private payment code addresses after a certain date, and would only be able to receive money into a private payment code address after a certain date, and the Dash full node wallet did that, and you funded maybe the top 5 third-party wallets to also do the exact same thing? Is that forcing anyone, or is that just simply implementing something? You can still, absolutely, if you wanted to, make payments on the Dash network that work otherwise, but now you would be incompatible with a vast majority of the ecosystem. That's not forcing you to do anything.
Yes, it's not necessarily a hardwire force, just like you can also avoid a regulation, just dodge the people trying to shoot you for a while. But it does make it de facto.
It's not a bullet.
It's not a bullet, but it does mean that you do not have that option easily available to you, or really practically available at all, unless you make your own wallet, unless you fork something else like that.
Right.
And it definitely does, in common vernacular, it does force people either into that way of doing, or it forces people, or it pushes people. Let's just say push. Push is a better word, because force is a little bit harder.
Right, exactly.
It pushes people either to do that, or to find an alternative way that lets them keep doing things their way. And so, for example, say you want people with complete financial transparency, absolute transparency. I'll give you an example. I mean, I'm sure you see me running around these conferences and stuff, promoting Dash and doing Dash sponsorships. I get paid from the treasury to do that. I've submitted some proposals to do that. As soon as it's a Coinbase transaction, it comes straight from the ether, no pun intended. It comes straight from nowhere, goes straight to the wallet. I instantly move that to a Trezor that only has treasury funds on it. And then every single thing I do with that money, every payment, everything has as few hops and complications as possible to ensure maximum auditability. Because I want someone who just is like perusing. We have a few people who do this, by the way, as a hobby. They just kind of look through the treasury, look through the blockchain, track proposal funds just for fun, and they found some very interesting stuff. I want some random kid who's just like, all right, let me see where this money went, and it goes here. And he says, all right, so this got paid for this sponsor, like literally one transaction for that sponsorship, that one, and then there's a little bit extra there. So there's absolutely no gray area. And so that option for some people in some circumstances is extremely valuable, and they would want the option of using a payment code rather than it to be difficult to use it. In which case, if Dash went that route, people would start, not everyone, but a certain chunk of people would start using Bitcoin Cash or Litecoin.
So actually, what you just mentioned as far as wanting the transparency, all of these privacy protocols give you the option of transparency if you wanted it, even after a private transaction. So for example, in Monero, you can just give someone your view key and say, oh, okay, here are my addresses. Here, go see my transactions. So in the case of payment codes, payment codes is even better. With payment codes, it's even better because you don't have to give them the view key. Because once you give a view key, you see everything. Yeah. Right. You see all of your incoming payments. With payment codes, you can actually just literally give the addresses that you deem are valuable for them to have seen their transactions for. So you could say, okay, here's all the addresses that I've received money into, because the payment code hides all of the addresses that you received money on. You don't actually see which addresses received money.
Can you do a payment code for a static single address? As in, can you have it so it sends to the payment code. No one sees the address, but all the funds are still going to a single address.
It's like a stealth address.
No, because it's actually the sender that determines your address that receives the money.
Mm-hmm.
But it's similar to stealth in the sense that, I'm not sure if you understand how stealth works, but in stealth, the sender effectively, it's kind of like an HD wallet, right? You have like your XPub, but you can generate a bunch of addresses, except that instead of you generating the addresses and giving that to a sender, the sender gets kind of the equivalent of your XPub, and then they choose where in your giant mass of addresses they actually want to send the money. But now the question is, how do you know where it is, right? So if I'm sending you money and I sent to one of your, address 4 million, how do you know that it's there? Well, in stealth, I have to then put that information somewhere on the blockchain that you have to then find. I send it on the blockchain kind of hidden for you to then find and then decrypt. And after you decrypt that, you go, oh, okay, here's where the money really is. So you have to scan the blockchain for that little nugget of information and try to decrypt it to know that. Whereas in payment codes, I actually can send that encrypted and you know exactly where it is, because I send it as a little dust payment to a known address that is associated to you. And you can then decrypt all the messages that go to that known address. And so you're only ever scanning this one address for these messages. Really, you have an address that receives payments, but all it does is doesn't send actual payments. It just receives messages that you decrypt over and over. And in those messages are where your money really is.
It raises some interesting questions, because if you think about that from a regulation standpoint, if it was integrated by default by like OneCoin, that would be a regulation issue. But if you had a third-party mobile wallet that integrated it by default, it wouldn't be so much, right? So like,
I mean, if it's part of what is deemed the protocol, meaning for compatibility, that's just part of the protocol standards, then regulation starts to have to ask some interesting questions, because while you might be making it more private from the viewpoint of what regulation doesn't like, you're also making it more private to just to even give the users of your coin privacy that even matches PayPal. Because right now, privacy for crypto is in some ways below PayPal and credit cards, right? I send you money, I see your address, and I see your transactions after that. Whereas
that's the next question, though, is how do we frame this in a way that regulators like? For example, what if every single wallet that has, say, private send and has payment codes and all this kind of stuff also has an audit trail button that just like a one simple way of providing to a, say, regulatory body who wants to say, hey, show me all the deets, and then it just kind of does that. I know, for example, Node 40 has a way of tracing private send transactions, of course, if you volunteer your public keys, etc., or tax calculation purposes specifically. So if there's a way of just kind of exporting all that,
that's easy.
Voluntary. If there's an easy, but if there's an easy audit button in every single wallet, then I don't think, and if regulators know about that, I don't think they'll have a problem very much with all these kinds of like payment codes and then advanced privacy features.
I mean, I think that's absolutely true for any platform, because at some point I have to know what transactions I have, right? And if I know what transactions I have some ability to give those transactions up to a body that asks me for them. But the regulators have to be okay with that, because most of the time they prefer to just simply not have to ask you, right? Yeah. But sure, if asking you and you being able to provide it is all that they need, that's true of any crypto, because at some point, some technology has to exist for me to know what transactions I've received. And if I have the ability to know what transactions I received, then I have the ability to share that. So whether I make it one button or more than that, then sure. Like right now in Monero and any currency that Edge supports, you can export all your transactions into a CSV file in like 2 buttons. So it doesn't matter how private the currency is, I know what my transactions are. And so the wallet lets me export that, and I could give that to someone if they really demanded an audit. So that's there, and it doesn't matter what technology is under the covers. We'll always be able to have that export to CSV that someone can optionally use. But the main thing is, when I say optional, I define it optional a little different than the way you defined it, as far as, I use private send or I don't. I receive on a stealth address or I don't. To me, the optional part shouldn't be at the sending and receiving protocol wallet level. It should be, do I want to expose the transactions that I've made, after the fact? Like the transaction's already done, it's already private, but do I want to then expose it? Not at the point when I want to receive or at the point when I want to send, do I have to make a decision? If you make the decision in the hands of the user at the point of receiving or sending, you'll almost certainly reduce by an order of magnitude the actual use of that privacy function.
Yeah. Now that's an interesting point, because now we start hitting the point of comparing features like options versus usability, and sometimes it's the chart intersects where the more options, the less the usability. And for example, that segues nicely into the Dash only Edge version that you were talking about of dash.edge.app. Is that the link correct?
That is the correct link. Yep.
And so you go there and it installs a version of Edge that only has Dash preloaded. You can still add other coins, but it starts just with Dash. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep.
Now, that is a huge value, despite being in what you could call, by some standards, an objectively inferior version than the normal one. When you just download Edge from like the Play Store or the App Store, it has 3 coins, right? Bitcoin Cash, Ether, and is that it?
That's it.
Is that what it starts with? Yeah, so it has 3 coins. And then we're all getting excited over a version that just has 1.
So what's the URL again? I want to add it to the video description. Is that dash.edge.app? Is that correct?
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
Yes. And so by limiting the choices, it actually improves the user experience, because if someone just wants a Dash wallet, or they want a Dash wallet and then figure out what they want to do next, like, oh, well, I might get some Bitcoin Cash at some point, but they just start with Dash, then it's immensely valuable to them. And so that's one of those things, which reminds me, a friend of mine is actually, he asked in the live chat, does Edge ever have any plans to include coin control functionality?
So coin control meaning like specific choice of inputs and outputs, correct? Yes. We don't have it in the roadmap. We didn't have it in Airbits, and it's such a like power user option that it hasn't even crossed our scope of wanting to include it. It would probably be a thing that would be a different application, and you log into that application. Might be like desktop, where you have enough space to view all of your inputs and outputs and have a UI to be able to pick them. And so it would definitely not go into what I would call our conventional Edge mobile app for the average end user. And one of the challenges of having options is, yes, a UX option, like, well, gosh, it's just harder for the user to use because it has so many options. And we could bury that into an advanced setting, because I'm sure that's what a lot of people tell us. They go, oh, well, just put it as an advanced. You have to turn it on before you get it. But there's actually a second thing that most end users don't think about, is as soon as you add it, you now have to test it. And now you have to test it with potentially every single release. And now your testing vectors start to explode, because you can now do so many things. This is what we saw happen when we incorporated more than one currency. So now with every release, we now have to go test multiple currencies, all of which behave a little bit differently and have different feature sets. But we accept that because we think that there's value in all of the features that we've added. Now, once we incorporate something that we think is like a very minutiae group of the ecosystem, now we're really asking, well, is that additional test vector really worth
it's funny.
effort?
This actually happened in real life, in my real world here. I was trying to pay for my coffee at Dash, and the point of sale wasn't working that day. And it wasn't just that; it wasn't working while CNN had a film crew with cameras pointed at me, trying to show them how great it was spinning. And I was freaking out. And it was because good thing I had the developer on speed dial, but it's because earlier that day they implemented the new Bitcoin Cash address format, and somehow that broke Dash.
Oh, I can totally see it happening. I can 100% see that happening. Can you share code? Because I mean, Dash, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin, they all share a very similar code base.
Yes, and they got that fixed. There's no problem with that. But just when you introduce complexity to the thing, also with the Dash wallet that worked, very well. Now with like the new PIN requirements and a couple other things, there have been some issues broadcasting transactions that didn't used to be there. And I'm sure it's not that something that it's not that it's a terrible wallet or anything like that, but it's that when you change a thing, some unintended things happen. Is one reason I'm not a coder, because I've tried to learn JavaScript. I'm kind of okay with HTML. I've tried to learn JavaScript and Visual Basic and other stuff, but it's just like it just you put a lot of work in, it just doesn't work. Sorry, it's not working. And it doesn't tell you where you have no. It's just so endlessly frustrating. So I don't have the patience.
These are some of the largest systems that we've ever built now. Like our systems and dependencies in software are getting bigger and bigger every year, and so they're getting quite complex. And the crypto space uniquely has some of the most complex client-side apps. So, like, in many apps, there's a server side and there's a client side. Before crypto, most apps were really servers with just a client side that just looked into the server, like Uber, right? It's a client side app, but a lot of the hard work of routing, drivers, all that stuff, sitting on the server. They're just showing you a map of where everything is. And so most problems are on the server, but you can patch it really quick because you have access to it. Client-side applications, you can't, especially mobile apps or downloadable apps, like Augur just launched. You got to download that app. When anything goes wrong there's this huge deployment process of like, okay, let's rebuild the app, let's upload it to the App Store, notify the users, then make sure they download it. There's a huge process to get an update in place that you want to make sure you get it right. Well, in the crypto world, our client-side apps are fat apps. I mean, they have a lot of logic in them. And so the odds of them having kind of an intricate, we changed one thing and it affected another are significantly higher. And because they're not on the server where we could just patch it if we find a problem. But that's part of the security model, right? Because they're client-side, you can't just get into a server, change something, and take everyone's money because they run on the client. So that's kind of the pro and con of the world that we live in.
So I noticed
we've talked about Monero. Just real quick, sorry, Joe. We talked about Monero and Zcash and some of these other coins. One of the potential problems for merchants now and definitely going into the future is double spins. Does Edge? Do y'all have instant send implemented in Edge?
We do not have instant send. I was talking to Joel about that, like online, but we don't have yet that implemented. We do need to have a better, and there isn't good documentation on this that I can easily find, but we need to have a better understanding of what exactly that requires at a protocol level. Like, well, how do we create the transaction? Where do we then send it? What do we then look for to know that it was kind of confirmed or not? So all of those things we don't know yet at this point. Yeah. And so we have to assess what's the effort involved.
Yeah, the hash engineering wallet, I believe, has it, and maybe the Copay that's in testing.
I know several wallets definitely do have it, and it's one of interest because I do value being able to note transaction confirmation pretty quickly, but you just need to know what actually it requires. So that's the main question.
Yeah, I don't think it's as big of a problem right now, but I see in the future definitely with double spins, and it'll be, people have programs and make that kind of thing easier and the larger purchases, and you don't want to have to wait, 10 minutes for Bitcoin or Monero or whatever to confirm.
There are definitely some interesting UI questions that arise with things like instant send, because now you've broken up the user's funds into an amount that can be instant send and an amount that can't. Because that could exist at any one point in time. So how do we then communicate that to the user? What pop-ups do we need to have? What do we show as balances? All of those things start to arise as UI, UX questions that extend past just the fact of, just implement instant send, right? So that's one of the things that I think a lot of non-developers don't realize when they think about, hey, get it up and running.
And also, to be fair, to be frank, a lot of developers don't realize that either. A lot of developers think
they do afterward. They do once they ship it out and people get confused.
Only when they get yelled at. Only if they listen to me yell. And I put so much time into providing detailed bug reports, feedback, and stuff for like every single wallet I've had. I was going to give one for Edge because it was not app sending whatsoever on a friend's wallet, but it turned out to be very isolated to just his phone. And we couldn't replicate it, so there wasn't anything to report. But yeah, we're in the trenches.
So let us know. Even report it, because sometimes that specific phone, we'll go ahead and literally buy that phone and try to reproduce it on our end.
Nice. Yeah, does Edge have a desktop wallet? They don't, do they? Is there plans for that? Is there plans?
No current plans for that. So Edge is kind of two-part. It's kind of a login subsystem that does kind of the encryption and backup of your keys. It gives you that UI for creating an account, username, password, PIN, all that kind of stuff. And then it's the wallet part that actually does the sending, receiving, that kind of stuff. The UI portion of it is actually both available for desktop and for mobile, but there's no wallet component that actually shows you your QR code, shows your transaction list, lets you scan. All that stuff isn't available on desktop yet, but could be developed, could even be a third-party application, and you'd be able to use the same account on both.
Yeah, I saw somebody in the comment section. They're asking about the private keys and how that would. I didn't understand. Can you explain more? Do y'all hold those keys, or am I able to get those, or how does that work?
So the keys are encrypted client side, but they are backed up to our servers. So we do hold an encrypted copy of the keys, but we don't have the key that can unlock the private keys. We don't actually have the password to unlock the keys. So that's how someone is able to restore their account on another phone, is the password allows them to download the data, right, from servers, and then it allows them to decrypt it client side.
Okay, so it's similar to Jax and Exodus and all the other ones, I guess.
No, it's actually not like any of those. So Jax and Exodus, you don't have a password that allows you to recover your account. You may have a password that secures your account only on that device. Actually, only on that device, meaning that if someone got your phone and literally opened up the phone and got your hard drive off the phone, they would still have to brute force your password to get access to the keys. So that password is only used to encrypt the data, but it's not used to back up the data. Meaning if you lost your phone, that password won't get you access to your private key. You have to have written down your private key. With Edge, we are able to take that same password and use it for two purposes. One for encrypting the data, and one for authenticating to a server to store it. So K server, please store this data. And we use two different hashes of the password, which I think is a very important thing. We take username and password, we hash it once for authenticating to the server, and we hash it again for encrypting the data. That way the server can't go from one hash to the other. Right? It's a one-way hash. So one is only for authentication, the other one is for encrypting. And the one for encrypting never leaves the device. It actually never even gets written into the device. It's in the user's head, effectively.
It's kind of what Trezor does, right? Don't they have the option for the password to, I mean, if somebody gets your...
No one does this other than Edge. To some degree, blockchain.info does this as well. But for the most part, every other wallet, that 12 words is the only backup you have. If you lose the device, you need the 12 words. There might be an additional password or a PIN that helps protect the key that's sitting on that device. But it's only a security measure. It's not a backup measure. It's not a recovery. I'm sorry, security versus recovery. So in most wallets, the password is just a security measure. It's not a backup measure. And in some wallets, they don't even give you the option for a password. They only give you an option for a PIN. So you're talking about the Dash Android wallet you were mentioning. To the best of my knowledge, that is a fork of the Schildbach Bitcoin wallet. And that uses the PIN as the encryption key to encrypt your private key, which in many ways is a very weak encryption key because it's what, 4 to 8 digits? Does that sound about right? How many digits is the PIN that you're noticing in the Dash Android wallet?
I think at least 4.
It's 4 to 8. I think you can do 8, but it's 4 to 8.
You can do 8. So at 4, I can break that in a minute. I could probably be able to break 4 in a minute or two. At most an hour, depending on how quickly they hash it, because there's so little entropy. There's 10,000 options. I can run through 10,000 options really quickly. 8, 100 million options that I can run through, probably within a couple days. Now, granted, I have to have access to the phone, or I'd have to have malware that got onto your phone that took your keys out. But the entropy is super low. Like if someone got access to the encrypted keys on your phone in one way, shape, or form, they'd easily be able to break that encryption. And so that's a polar opposite of Edge, where the encryption is not done with the PIN. The PIN is actually an authentication mechanism to say, hey, server, give me half of an encryption key. And the other half is actually sitting on their phone. The two come together to decrypt the data. So that's an interesting kind of difference and one that most people don't realize as far as how data is actually encrypted on the device.
So would you say it's the most secure mobile wallet in the space?
I'll never ever say most secure or insecure, because the one thing I've realized is security is very subjective, meaning what are you even securing against? Like what is the thing that you're trying to secure against? And then you could start to say, is it more secure against that or not? But if you just say just general security, it's not like 100 and then here's 0, right? It's not like that. It's almost like, okay, well, here's one aspect of security, here's another aspect, here's another aspect. And then which one are you more secure against of the different options?
Yeah,
so
it's one of those meaningless trash talk terms like number one pound for pound fighter. Oh yeah, he's no pound for pound greatest in the world. It's like,
what's even worse than that? It's like saying who's the best fighter in the world. That's what's saying is it the most secure. It's like saying who's the best fighter in the world, not considering pound for pound, not considering style, not considering how long they're going to fight for, how quick, or are they going to have weapons or not.
Which, by the way, that's the answer to that is Mark. He's One Punch Man. Look at him.
That bald head is.
Yeah. I still need to see this comic or anime show. Everyone
I don't
keeps
know
saying
what
this
that
One
is.
Punch Man. I need to figure this out. I need to check this out. Apparently, it's a good thing, so that's good. All this talk about like logging in and that sort of stuff, it's got me actually thinking about Dash Evolution, because one of the things that I'm excited for.
You mean you stopped thinking about it to begin with?
Come on, let's be honest. I'm stayed Dashy 24/7, 365. I don't stop thinking about Dash, but
yeah, he's like a shark. You know, like a shark, if it stops moving, it stops, but it dies. It can't breathe through its gills anymore. So he's just Dashy. He needs to stay Dashy, or he decomposes.
So I'm not sure if Paul is aware about this with Dash Evolution, but one really cool, unique feature that maybe even our viewers might not be aware of, and it may not be in the first initial release of Evolution, but it is something they do want to implement, is actually like login authentication. So for web app-based applications, where for our users watching, if you sign up to a new service and say like, oh, you can sign up for your email, or you can log in with your Facebook account or Google, it's going to be an option for Dash, because within Dash Evolution, obviously you can have your friends list, that sort of stuff. So like, this is going to be such a big game changer. And just thinking about all the talk about the login authentication stuff earlier on, I've just seen blockchain used in this way. I think it's going to be such a revolutionary thing. I don't even think people are ready for it yet. It's going to be amazing.
No, I think it is actually amazing. That's one of our big pitches for why it's so important for us to secure private keys in an easy way. Because once we secure private keys for crypto, those private keys can be used for millions of other things, well, thousands of other things. But one of those things is to authenticate with even centralized services. Like, I want to authenticate using my private keys and signing a message to every web-based service that I have. And that's one of the reasons why the original Airbits wallet supported a protocol called BitID, which allowed you to authenticate with central services using a message signed by your private key. And it's something that we're going to be porting into Edge. And it's actually implemented by one of our partners, Kraken. So when you go and buy crypto inside of Edge and connect to Kraken, it's actually automatically logging you into Kraken using a public private key, and you don't even see it happen. Like, you log into Airbits, you go to buy Bitcoin, and if you've already created an account inside of the app, you're automatically logged into Kraken using public private key. And you can take that same wallet and go onto their website and log in by scanning a barcode. You don't have to enter a password. You can actually have an account that simply doesn't even have a password. That, to me, is the right way to do things. Centralized servers shouldn't hold passwords. We should instead have wallets that hold keys to authenticate with those servers. And so if that's what Dash Evolution is doing, great, thumbs up. I'm all for that. Because keys should be used for other uses, not just strictly crypto.
Excellent. Well, I think we should actually give Paul the opportunity before we wrap up to actually talk about Edge. Have you got any like updates or developments? What's up and coming, or is there anything that's happened recently that you want to plug or talk about?
Well, one thing I want to plug is on the Edge website. If you look down on like who's reported on it, right next to Forbes, it says Dash Force News right there.
Heck yeah! How could we not? You guys wrote such an awesome, glowing article about us. We super appreciate it.
Apparently, we're at Forbes level. So if Forbes becomes fake news, then apparently we get associated to be fake news as well. Anyway, so go on to whatever else is awesome and up and coming with Edge, because it's impressive so far.
If people weren't tuned in a couple of weeks ago, we did launch node support for other cryptos such as XRP, Ripple, and Monero, and so that was kind of the more recent thing, with a launch that we just pushed out this week. So literally today, we now support sweeping of private keys across cryptos, including Dash, which we didn't support before. So that's one major feature, as well as BIP70 payment protocol, which I'm honestly not a huge fan of, but we have to support. Like, we're forced to, in that kind of gentle, non-violent way. We were forced to. We were nudged to. We were pushed to. And so we implemented that support. So now people can use Edge to pay merchants that require BIP70 payment protocol. And we had a bunch of small. Huh? Who?
Hey,
I know.
Yeah, that was actually a cause of very limited quiet drama in the Bitcoin Cash community, that BitPay was touted forever, saying, oh, well, now they take BitPay, and now you can spend Bitcoin Cash everywhere. But almost every single wallet imaginable could not pay a BitPay invoice in Bitcoin Cash. And now Edge is one of these things.
Yeah, we're one of the few. So, yep, we could do it. Obviously, BitPay's wallet could do it. They made sure that was doable from the start. But
yes, in fact, a friend of mine only got a BitPay wallet so he could actually pay Bitcoin Cash invoices.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
Now he doesn't have to anymore. Now he's not pushed to. Now Edge Edge diversifies the market. You can just get Edge. You can stop toying around with all these other amateur wallets. You can sign up for what really works. And if you don't, well, we'll hunt you down and we'll find you or something.
We'll let you do that. Yeah. But we're not going to put a gun to you.
No. Paul, I was just wondering, it must be a little bit difficult in your position as CEO and co-founder, because you kind of have to remain blockchain agnostic. You can't really, if say for example, if they're like, we should add this coin, you can't really be vocal. We're like, oh no, that coin's absolute toilet. No chance that's coming on Edge. Like, is there any coins that come in and you're just like, do you have to like censor yourself because you have to keep a clean kind of angelic image, right?
Let's just say that the threshold is definitely lower for us to say like something is garbage. I don't use the word scam as easily as most people do, right? Yeah. Scam, garbage, trash, because I feel like we are still in an era of like figuring things out and seeing what will work. And so we're supportive. We're very supportive of most of the top coins. Now, granted, I know of one that my co-founder, who's very, very technical and can read white papers, when he's asleep, has written off as being effectively broken. So the only one that we've publicly stated we wouldn't implement is IOTA.
Really? That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Brian's laughing because he knows. There's a friend of mine who's also a big Dash guy who's always on Twitter, and he just loves IOTA to death, and he loves Dash to death. And I cannot wrap my head. I've refrained from saying too many negative things about IOTA, but it does not seem like it's working at this point in time.
Right.
But
I'm going to be super politically correct and just say that.
Can you talk a little bit more about this? Because isn't IOTA, didn't they used to brag that they looked at other like white papers and stuff, and they wanted to get the best of all worlds? Like, what's the actual issue here?
So the issue, and once again, I'm having to regurgitate information. You might want to bring on my co-founder onto your show to actually talk about it.
Just the general gist, because I'm unaware of this.
So there's no kind of single blockchain, it's a DAO protocol, where instead of there being miners that compete against each other, instead IOTA opted to have each transaction mined. So every transaction that you create, you actually put some hash power into the transaction, which someone that builds on top of your transaction kind of verifies. So the problem was, if everyone's going to put mining and hash power and proof of work into each transaction, then you couldn't require a lot of proof of work. Right? You can't make me mine for 10 minutes just so I can send a transaction. So the proof of work was so insanely low that it was negligible and practically unnecessary, right? Because anybody could effectively mine a transaction, whether valid or not, and could mine an entire string of transactions on top of each other that are invalid. And so what ended up happening about a week after my co-founder came to me saying, I looked at the white paper of IOTA and I deem it quite broken. About a week after he came to me and said that, IOTA had to effectively say, sorry, we actually need to make all validation go through a central server, us.
Yep.
They shut down, transactions stopped happening for some period of time. And they said, okay, we're just simply going to make all the validation go through our central server until we figure stuff out. And that was after he had kind of came to me and said, yeah, I deem this thing as being pretty damn broken. So to my understanding, that's effectively where they're at right now. Someone, please, you're welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, if they had fixed something and changed the protocol. But to understand that's where they currently sit, is they validate every single transaction because the actual consensus mechanism didn't work.
Yeah, I remember one of the big selling points of that sort of setup is free transactions, meaning you don't have to pay a unit of the currency, but you do have to do a minuscule amount of proof of work. But one of the points of fees was to prevent spamming of the network. And one thing that I do remember happening at one point was the entire network became unusable. I've lost count how many times that's happened. But one of the times that it happened is because someone flooded it with an insane amount of spam transactions, and they were included with the message "coordinator sucks," and coordinator being the centralized node through which they had to process everything. And so I'm not going to, obviously, it's one of those never say never type things, because
they could fix it.
But at the present time, I would guess everyone should understand Edge's decision not to explore implementing IOTA at this juncture.
Yeah, and so until I try not to hate, so I don't hate IOTA, I don't hate the team. It seems like a technical break that potentially they might fix. They might hard fork fix the problem, and we'll relook at it again. There's no currency that in the top 20, 30 that I would say like I downright hate. It's just a matter of like we analyze, do we deem that it has some value and some workability in a, I won't even call it decentralized, that's a bad word. It's in a pretty well distributed, more permissionless type of a system. And if it fits, then the real question is consumer demand versus engineering effort. Once it passes the threshold of like this thing isn't totally broken, then it's one of those two things: consumer demand and engineering effort.
Next iteration, we can expect Litecoin Cash.
Consumer demand. Actually, Litecoin Cash is one of the hardest ones to do.
Really?
Yeah, that's one of the hardest ones because that actually implements privacy protocols that I believe are along the lines of Zcash's privacy protocols, if I'm not mistaken, which we don't have libraries to do at this point. So I have to look more carefully at it. I don't know the exact, but we sure as heck aren't getting a whole lot of consumer demand for it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I won't use it, so don't ask me.
Well, Paul,
well, just real quick, one of the issues I'd seen with IOTA, I don't know if this is coming from the official people or not, but I see it a lot saying that IOTA is one of the fastest confirmations or whatever. But I pointed out that no, actually instant send is much faster because in IOTA, once you send a transaction, there's a small cryptographic puzzle that it's required to solve to cut down on the spam and everything, which slows it down. So, I mean, they're basically the instant send and IOTA are, 1 second for the first transaction, but after that, that's where IOTA slows down. And it seems like that was coming from some official stuff, but I don't know for sure.
I would be, not that I like IOTA, but I would be careful to try to make that argument against IOTA people because if the first transaction is fast, but everything after that is slow, that's possibly true of Dash as well.
It's slower than Dash. It's slower than Dash.
It's slower than the, what is it, 2-minute confirmation time?
No, you're talking about the
multiple instant
block,
send,
right?
Yeah, multiple instant send payments. Because I guess there's a in order to prevent spam on IOTA, there's some kind of small cryptographic puzzle they have to solve before you can keep sending multiple once. I know I've seen the videos to where he just sends the instant send just really quickly. I mean,
yeah, now
it is really quick.
As far as the follow-up to instant send, obviously,
the follow-up.
The follow-up is it's locked for 5 on blockchain confirmations, which what's 5 times 2.5, right? It's a little bit of time.
I think they're looking into fixing that. Though.
However, there's some stuff, and this is just way beyond all my paid grades combined. But supposedly looking into using state transitions as a way of making so that you can locked input, you can still use instant send, but send it from one person to then the next person before they're actually confirmed on the blockchain. And I have no idea how that would necessarily work, but it has something to do with the way Evolution uses state transitions to provide friending between different wallets. And it's something to do with something to do with that
as well. Above my pay grade as well. I mean, you do have hope with something like a UTXO based currency like Dash to be able to say, well, I can do multiple instant sends if each of them are from different UTXOs. So you at least have that hope. But if all of your money gets sent in a transaction and all of the change coming back is unconfirmed, then you're stuck. You've got to wait. I think it's actually 6 confirmations from what I've heard. So about 12 minutes, I presume. But
something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's got a purpose. It's super great for you. Just walk up to something, make one payment, you're done. And most people, that's really what they do, right? How many people fire off payments especially to merchants? Usually it's I walk up, I pay, and then I go sit and enjoy whatever I'm having before I ever pay again. So it works great for the use case it was built for.
Yeah, Joel's ran into those problems that you're talking about too with giving out free Dash. Yeah.
When you're giving out, exactly, which is not a common use case for anything outside of cryptocurrency. If you think about it.
Yeah,
only crypto people go do that. Where am I going to send you? Like, we're donating.
If you're playing Monopoly, if you're doing like, oh, you got some of this, some of that. But yeah, it definitely does. I heard it described as the only time you'd want to use instant send is you want to be super secure right away in some kind of a very large payment or a merchant facing, as in the merchant would demand it, the customer wouldn't need to do it. So at a coffee shop or whatever. There is, and I've seen the way it pops out in the core wallet. When you can request an instant send payment, it just has the address, and then it goes like, and IS equals 1 at the end of the address. And so when you just scan the thing, it checks the instant send box, and then you do it. And that would be like a merchant requesting in the point of sale system at for example, a restaurant or something, but it wouldn't be like a default, you just send to your friends around kind of thing. And
got it.
or for example, say you want to to pay for your car at the dealership, and you don't want to wait around 10 minutes. I mean, that's kind of a long time, even for a large purchase, but you're not going to be buying something from the vending machine right after that. And so it's just going to be, you pay for it instant send and you drive off, like something like that.
There is a very interesting protocol which came out of the Bitcoin Cash community, but I think it predates Bitcoin Cash. But they're looking at it, which I think Dash should look at. It does require more of a change in instant send. It doesn't use the master nodes and whatnot, but it allows you to have all transactions instantly confirmed, every single one. And it inverts the mining order. So normally the way we mine is we get a bunch of transactions into a block, and then we mine that block, and now those transactions are confirmed. If you've heard of have any of you heard of the Bitcoin NG protocol?
No.
This is the proposal.
Bitcoin MBG.
NG. Not MBG. So the NG.
Yeah, that's something Mark says. MBG, no bloody good.
MBG. No bloody good. This one's let's see. No, it's just simply no good. But no, so the NG protocol basically says, well, instead of taking transactions first that are unconfirmed and then mining them, instead you mine for the solution. So you solve the puzzle, and then the miner gets a golden ticket to then instantly confirm every transaction after that until another person mines a block. And so they effectively get this magic wand that says, tap, you're confirmed, but they have a monetary incentive to not screw that up, because if the next person that mines a block publishes a proof that they screwed up, they lose the money. So it's like having a pre-incentive versus I now published a block and I already got the money. It's you've already got the money first, and now you go and pick the transactions. So as the transactions come in, they basically get magic wand confirmed, just like that.
These kinds of discussions make me think about how everyone is trying to do all kinds of different fancy bells and whistles on blockchain platforms. What kind of smart contracts can we do? What kind of this? What kind of that? And just the very insanely simple send this from this to that money application that Bitcoin came up with in 2009, for crying out loud. There's just still so much complexity that can be figured out with that. And just, I mean, we're so new to this space. It's like the one thing people don't realize about cryptocurrency is just how in its infancy it still is almost a decade later, that it's still just like, it's still like an old jalopy with like a hand crank to start the engine.
I mean, it was still first rev, right? It was really first rev. And so are we going to have a second significant rev after the fact? And to do even just the basic things, not a second rev 2.0 that does like smart contracts, but a second rev that kind of helps both optimize, scale, and make things faster. So
is there going to be a digital currency evolution?
Well, that's actually a good segue. So
digital cash evolution.
This is great. So I really appreciate you coming on. You've got such a wealth of knowledge. But as this is the Dash podcast, I have to ask, do you own Dash, and what do you like about Dash?
I actually really like the model by which you guys have to be able to improve the currency and improve the ecosystem. That's what I love the most about it. And I do own Dash, correct? But the way that can push forward, and why I think Dash has been successful while it continued to be, is because you have this governance layer that really lets you fund ideas very freely, like Dash Force News. I think that's what's been missing, and it originated, to my understanding. I don't think many currencies have tried to do this, after the fact, but I think it originated with Dash. That to me is actually one of its founding huge value propositions, and what's helped make it successful today. And I think it's what's going to make it very, very competitive going forward, is that we can take things that originally were just simply someone who had a bunch of Bitcoin that said, I want to help improve the ecosystem, so maybe I'll put some money in this project or company. Instead, it becomes an actual governance question, and everyone contributing into these masternodes can help make that decision. That I really like.
Dash Ventures, you could check that out.
Yeah, it's kind of a venture fund. It's a decentralized venture fund.
Well, we're working on a bigger part of that. All right, y'all ready to wrap it up?
Yeah,
most def.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, I will be in the Dash Discord community channel, dashchat.org, for a after party, and we only have 10 spaces available. So if you're watching this, listening to this live, go there, check it out after the podcast is wrapped up, and we have community members in there, milestone owners, sometimes Dash Core team members as well. So we can talk about what was discussed on tonight's podcast.
Yeah, you can swear, talk smack about other people and other projects. It's not recorded. You know, whatever floats your boat. And also, if someone starts like nodding off later into the evening and then they get booted, you can come in if there wasn't a space at the beginning.
Yeah, nice. IOTA fans welcome as well.
Yes, absolutely. I like that.
We love you too, because we figure you might fix your problem later.
Yeah,
well, that's exactly it. Like at PorkFest just a few weeks ago, I had a debate with Tone Vase for an hour and a half, and Tone Vase is Tone, and I think we got a lot more mutual understanding at the end of it. I wouldn't call him a nice guy, but I wouldn't call him a monster either. He just and by sitting down and having these in-depth, face-to-face, skin-to-skin, no, scratch that.
Yeah.
But face-to-face kind of discussions is really what keeps people from hiding behind Twitter handles and just screaming at the void.
Yeah.
So remember, if you have not already, go to dash.edge.app, and this is not because Paul paid us anything, because he certainly did not, but because I personally, myself, believe that that's a great place to go to get your Edge wallet, because I use Edge wallet and it's great. I'm usually use the other Dash wallet because I'm actively field testing it so I could give error reports and stuff. But Edge is the one thing that hasn't let me down yet. I have a bunch of different apps that I've used, and everything has kind of caused an issue at some point. Edge, maybe because it's new, hasn't, but I'm willing to just say it's because it's the best in the business. That's why it hasn't. There was one last Edge related question, which was, can it import private keys without sweeping them?
Not at this point. That is something that we have interest in doing. So it's not so advanced we want to hide that ability. So yes, it's something on the roadmap, but not yet.
Okay. And Paul, what's your Twitter? Is it like @Paulinator or something like that? Terminator.
@Paulinator, yep.
Okay.
@Paulinator. So PAULLI. Yeah, figure out.
So the last question for you then is, will you be back?
If you'll invite me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Just let me know.
Well, thank you to Paul. Also, @EdgeSecure is the main Edge Twitter account, right?
@EdgeSecure. That might actually change in the future. We've got a new domain, so Edge app. Our company is just called Edge, by the way. So the company's Edge. The only thing that was, EdgeSecure was the Twitter handle in our old domain. But now our new domain, edge.app. We may be changing the Twitter handle as well. But the company's just simply Edge. @EdgeSecure on Twitter.
Well, excellent. Well, that was episode 60 of the Dash Force Free Amigos podcast. I'd like to thank Paul, the CEO and co-founder of Edge. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Cool.
And I hope you found this video to be informative. Have a great weekend. Stay positive, stay humble, and stay dashy.
Yep.
Bye, guys.